Hello everyone! Welcome to our exciting GDIG training video. Today, we're diving into the essential aspects of diagnostics, calibration, and configuration for Medallion's GDIG gauge. Before we jump in, please take a moment to download the GDIG manual from the link provided. This video may not cover every option for every gauge. It is meant to cover the basic structure of settings for all GDIG gauges. For detailed instruction, you can contact tech support and they can send you a user guide for the specific gauge that you are working on. Remember, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to us at 866-49-23686 or email us at techsupport@medallionis.com. We're here to help! Powering up the GDIG takes around 4 seconds. As it powers up, you'll see the needle move. In these gauges, you'll see the needle jump and vibrate for a second. Some gauges may have a more predominant sweep, where it'll move to the maximum location and back to the minimum location, and then finally at the location where it needs to be. Once the boot-up sequence is complete, the normal operating screen will appear. After a few seconds, if the gauge is not communicating with the engine, then it will display no ECU data on the LCD display. Press any button to clear the error. If this error is displayed, then you must troubleshoot why the gauge is not communicating with the engine. During normal operation, you can program the LCD to display the following information. You do this by pressing the left or right button. The left button will program the left side of the LCD display, while the right button will program the right side. If anything on the list is not an option while pressing either button, then you can check the LCD screen setting in the gauge to see if it's been disabled. We will go through this in a moment. To get into setup, you must press and hold both buttons at the same time. After holding them for approximately 1 second, you will see the word setup appear on the display. At this point, you can release the buttons. Right now, you are in the main setup screen. In this screen, you can scroll down to the configuration, diagnostics, or calibration that you wish to go to. To do this, you must press the left button to scroll down. The word Next is above the left button to help you remember what that button is for. The word Change or Select will be displayed above the right button. With the GDIG, you can only scroll down. You cannot scroll up. So if you accidentally scroll past the setting you are trying to reach, you will have to scroll all of the way through the settings to get back to it. So be careful and slow down while scrolling through. In the setup mode, you have the following options: units, engine, rudder sensor, trim gauge, fuel 1, fuel 2, LCD screens, LCD backlight, LCD contrast, calibrate speed, calibrate trim, reset fuel used, gauge information, diagnostics, restore defaults, and exit setup. Once you see exit setup, press the right button where it says select. This will exit you out of the setup mode and into normal operation. Now that we've gone through how to maneuver around the GDIG, I'm going to give you a brief description of what each option has to offer. Units changes units from English to metric for all applicable data. Engine identifies gauge function to match the installation. Single should be chosen when only one engine is on the data bus. Starboard should be chosen when the gauge is to display starboard engine data. Port should be chosen when the gauge is to display port engine data. Rudder sensor changes the type of signal from normal to invert. Trim gauge configures the GDIG to output correct trim information based on system configuration. 1-in-1 should be chosen for systems that have a standalone trim gauge. 2-in-1 should be chosen for systems that have a port and starboard trim on a second gauge. Fuel 1 or 2 defines the source for fuel 1 or 2 data. Primary ECM fuel should be chosen for systems where fuel information for this gauge or the connected second gauge is plugged into the fuel input of the primary engine. Secondary ECM fuel should be chosen for systems where fuel information for this gauge or the connected second gauge is plugged into the fuel input of the secondary engine. Primary ECM for tank 2 should be chosen for systems where fuel information for this gauge or the connected second gauge is plugged into the tank 2 input of the primary engine. Secondary ECM tank 2 should be chosen for systems where fuel information for this gauge or the connected second gauge is plugged into the tank 2 input of the secondary engine. Evinrude fuel should be chosen for systems where fuel information for this gauge or the connected second gauge is plugged into the Evinrude engine. Gauge input should be chosen for systems where fuel information for this gauge, or the connected second gauge, is plugged into the analog input pin 9 of the 12 or 16-pin connector on the gauge. There are some gauges that will configure the fuel level a little differently. Instead of pulling the information directly from the ECM automatically, they will require that you select the source address for the fuel level. If you have the wrong address configured here, then the fuel level will not work. If that happens, simply return to this section and change the address until it works properly. LCD screens defines the data available for view in the left and right sections of the LCD display during normal operation. As I mentioned earlier in this video, you can either enable or disable the individual data. You do this by changing the status in this section. LCD backlighting adjusts the brightness of the graphical display. LCD contrast adjusts the contrast of the graphical display. Calibrate speed places an offset on the speed display to account for installation and system variables. This can go up to plus or minus 50%. Calibrate trim identifies 3 positions in the trim range to ensure the trim value gauge matches the actual position. The down position must be set while the engine is in the lowest position. The max position is set while the engine is in the highest position, but this is not talking about while the boat is in the trailer. The up or trailer position is set while the engine is in the position, while the boat is on the trailer. While calibrating the trim, you must make sure that the engine is in the proper position while you set the down, max, and up or trailer positions. If you set all 3 of these positions while the engine is in the same location, then the calibration will not work. Reset fuel used allows you to reset the amount of fuel used to 0. Gauge information provides the engine setting, software version, and software installation date for the gauge. This screen requires the press of either button to return to the main setup menu. Diagnostics provides raw data for analog inputs to the gauge, which can assist trained technicians in troubleshooting the gauge system. It can also tell you if the gauge is communicating with the ECU or the GPS. If it's communicating, then you will see ECU or GPS OK. If not, then you will see no ECU or GPS. This screen requires the press of either button to return to the main setup menu. Restore Defaults returns most gauge settings to manufacturer's defaults. Exit Setup exits the main setup menu and returns the gauge to normal operation. Thank you for participating in the GDIG Gauge Training video. We hope you found this session informative and engaging. As you move forward, remember that if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Your feedback is invaluable, and we are committed to helping you succeed. We look forward to seeing how you apply your new knowledge and skills with the GDIG gauge in your work.